Hey y'all, welcome back to another stream. Hopefully the sound is better. I fiddled with my microphone a little bit before I started going live, but looks like the levels might be a little on the low side, so just let me bump it up a little bit. And we'll see how that goes. But other than that, I'm feeling, like the title says, I'm feeling better. No illnesses, no ailments, slight headache, but I am honestly pretty distracted today. For reasons I'd rather not go into. But all that being said, we're gonna go ahead and just get into the story editing now, because hopefully editing will be something I can just focus on. You know, I know I can get distracted even with editing, but it's still nice to not need to worry about it, you know? So, let's see. Oh yeah, Sylvia just got a text from her mom, from Vanessa's mom. Not much later that night, Sylvia and her mom are walking into the emergency room lobby looking around. Alright, we're gonna want to be specific. What emergency room? Actually. Sylvia! A vaguely familiar female voice said. Sylvia looked over at the rows of chairs that were lined up in the cold, sterile room and saw a familiar woman, Vanessa's mom, standing to call out to them. The three women came together in the middle. Sylvia, I'm glad you made it, Vanessa's mom said before forgetting her manners. Before remembering her manners and reaching out a hand toward Sylvia's mother. My apologies, I forget myself. My name is Veronica Fletcher? Hold on. So we are going to need to make that better at some point. Fletcher or Franklin? I guess we'll have to make that decision later. Oh, and by the way, guys, I am ending at 5 today. Just so you guys are aware, I've got stuff to do before dinner. Sylvia's mother smiled politely and took the hand to shake. If I was in your shoes, I'd have done the same thing. Heidi Mulligan. Pleased to meet you, Heidi. The pleasure's mine. Alright. Mrs. Heidi Mulligan. I spelled that wrong, but it's fine. The woman shook hands as Sylvia waited off to the side, her patience evident, but wearing thin. That's a weird phrase. Once the pleasantries were done, Sylvia spoke up. What's up with Vanessa? Mrs. Fletcher paused, looking at Mrs. Mulligan, and then looked back towards Sylvia. The doctors think that all the time in the sun today aggravated her body so much that it led to her body being unable to hold off the cancer much longer. We're gonna kind of highlight this a little bit. We're gonna mark this for research. She paused. It was already likely that it would have happened anyway, but given what stage it's in, she glanced at Sylvia's mother, unsure. Sylvia filled me in on the way over. Yeah, I don't know if she would even care about that. Only looking partially reassured, Vanessa's mother continued. But either way, yeah, let's just keep all that together. But either way, the effect of today, and possibly prom, Sylvia mentally praised herself for knowing how deadly prom was, and then immediately reprimanded herself for the thought. either way, the effect of today and possibly prom led her body to weakening to the point where any extra energy reserves that it was using to keep the impacts of the cancer at bay are no longer there. I'm gonna mark that for the research portion too. Sylvia shook her head. She understood the basics of what Vanessa's mom was saying, but that wasn't telling her what she needed to know. But how's Vanessa? Mrs. Fletcher turned her gaze toward Sylvia and gave her a warm but sad smile. Vanessa is in a lot of pain right now. One sec. Guys. Over to just Facebook for a second and I got caught in a rabbit hole. Anyway, where was I? And Sylvia shook her head. She understood the basics of what Vanessa's mom was saying, but that wasn't telling her what she needed to know. But how's Vanessa? Mrs. Fletcher turned her gaze toward Sylvia and gave her a warm but sad smile. Vanessa is in a lot of pain right now. When I left her room not too long ago, they had given her morphine for the pain. She paused, bringing both of her lips into her mouth as she bit them in thought. She probably won't be back at school for the next few days. Can I ask? What about her cancer treatment? Sylvia asked. I don't like that. She had realized that although she knew her friend had cancer, she never spoke about any sort of treatment and never appeared to have any of the side effects that people talk about when they go through treatment. 1 second. Vanessa. She had realized that although she knew that her friend had cancer, she never spoke about any sort of treatment and never appeared to have any of the side effects that people talk about when they go through treatment. Mrs. Fletcher laughed despite herself, and the corners of her mouth upturned quickly as they trembled and ended up in a determined line. I think I know I was going for with this, but I don't like the end result here. She hasn't had any yet, she said, her voice thick. The news was a shock to Sylvia, who sat down in the nearest seat at the revelation. Mrs. Fletcher continued, She asked us to hold off until the summer. She wanted to graduate being as healthy as she could, She wanted to graduate being as healthy as she could make herself to be without any sort of treatment. I'm going to mark this for continuity because I feel like all of this for continuity. I feel like Vanessa would have told Sylvia, or I feel like I had, anyway. Any treatment would have had to have been aggressive, Mrs. Mulligan agreed. I can see why she would have asked for that. I'm gonna highlight this a little bit. But what about now? Sylvia asked. If she's in pain, it's obviously impacting her enough to come here. That needs to... yeah. Mrs. Fletcher gulped and nodded. I understand where you're coming from, she said. I want to do nothing more than to tell her to take the treatments, but I want her to want that choice. You're her mom, Sylvia said. You can make her, just like you did when you told her that she can't hang out with me anymore. Mrs. Fletcher gave Sylvia a sad smile. I'm sorry for that. We just thought it wasn't a good idea. But you do know you wouldn't be here if she hadn't convinced us otherwise. But that's different, Sylvia huffed. She knew that Vanessa's mom could make her take the medicine if she wanted to, but even though Vanessa wasn't 18 yet, she's not 18? But even though Vanessa wasn't 18 yet, she still was smart enough to make choices on her own, especially choices that impacted her quality of life during her last year of high school. And, given what Sylvia knew, this was her only year of actually attending high school. Of course, Vanessa would want as little reminder of the cancer as possible. And her mother was just doing her best to respect her daughter's wishes. Sorry guys, the text is dancing on the screen for me right now, so reading is a little tough. I know, Mrs. Fletcher said. She swallowed and continued. But once we begin cancer treatment, we cannot stop. It has to start and be followed through until the end. Whatever end that is, Sylvia muttered. Sylvia's mother hit her on the shoulder. Mrs. Fletcher continued on as if she didn't hear Sylvia. If it stops before it's had a chance to do the work, then it could be just as effective as not doing any treatment at all. Actually, she was quick to realize and correct herself. I'm going to highlight that for edit. It would be worse, because if you don't do treatment, you can at least start at any point. If you start and stop prematurely, you have to wait until a treatment what? Until a treatment what? Oh, until the treatment can begin again. I feel like I need to explain this better, honestly. Sylvia frowned. So, what's going to happen now? Vanessa's going to miss a few days of school, and then what? Internally, Sylvia was panicking. There were only 3 weeks of school left. And then exam week. She wasn't sure how much Vanessa would be able to miss before she wouldn't be able to take the exams, or if she'd even be able to take the exams at all. The doctors are going to watch her condition overnight, Mrs. Fletcher explained, and depending on how she reacts to the normal methods of pain management, they'll recommend a course of action. She looked pointedly at Sylvia, tilting her head down toward her. They'll, of course, recommend a cancer treatment, but unless Vanessa agrees to it, or the situation is so bad she won't be leaving the hospital without it, we'll be holding off until after graduation. Sylvia, torn as she was over her friend's well-being and quality of life, nodded her understanding. Alright. Sylvia... April, Just like Vanessa's mother predicted, Vanessa was in the hospital for the remainder of the week. She came home Friday afternoon. Although both Sylvia and Vanessa tried to petition their parents into allowing Sylvia to go over for a visit, apparently the doctor's orders were for strict rest when she's not at school to avoid any further relapses before treatment could begin. Sylvia felt like they could still visit Vanessa while Vanessa was resting. Let me try that again. Sylvia felt like they could still visit while Vanessa was resting, but Sylvia's mother argued that even though Vanessa might stay in bed during visits, reliving the school day and engaging in conversation would be enough to make the visits not restful. I'm gonna highlight this for just a rework, which, her mother pointed out, would be the opposite of the doctor's orders. So, the weekend that Vanessa came home, Sylvia decided to reach out as best she could, through text message. I'm gonna look for rework on that too. Alright, so... Alright, this is still exposition, so we're not going to set the date yet. At first, it was successful. She and Vanessa were chatting through message, with only maybe 1 or 2 minutes between messages. However, about an hour into their conversation, Vanessa sent a reply that said, "Mom says I can't do this as much. She is saying I can reply every 30 minutes at a minimum." Sylvia stuck her tongue out at the phone. Alright, so yeah, we'll do that Saturday then. So, the 15th was Monday? Yeah. 15th, 17th, 19th, so that's the 20th. Sylvia stuck her tongue out at the phone, envisioning Vanessa's mother on the other end. Instead... What do you mean instead? Just cut that. She reacted to the message with a thumbs up and sent K. And to answer your question from before, I don't have Tom's number to pass along to you. Can give it on Monday. The rest of the weekend went by slowly as Sylvia kept checking her phone for messages from her friend, and then hurriedly made sure to respond as soon as she saw something come through. The rest of the time she spent either finishing her homework for the weekend or at her desk working on a large painting that she wanted to be finished by graduation. I think I need to address that later too, I think. Exam week was only 2 weeks away now, and graduation was at the end of exam week. Oh yeah, because it was Monday night. Yep, that works. For the majority of the school, exam week was all week long, but for seniors, it was just the first 3 days, with schedules specially arranged so that the students could take the exams without severely impacting the rest of the school's educational flow. Then that Saturday was the graduation at the football field. After that, students typically had an overnight lock-in graduation party at one of the local bowling alleys. And Sylvia had already been invited to several personal... I think they would know that by now, so I'm going to actually highlight this for rework. And after that, students typically had an overnight lock-in graduation party at one of the local bowling alleys. We didn't even talk about a senior trip on this. I'm gonna... I feel like every graduating class has a senior trip. A heads up for my Twitch viewers, there is an ad that starts in 3 to 4 minutes. Anyway, after that, students typically had an overnight lock-in graduation party at one of the local bowling alleys. And Sylvia had already been invited to several personal graduation parties for the week afterward. She wasn't sure she was going to any of them. And then I have this note about the senior trip. Obviously not going to be this paragraph, but you'd think it'd come up somewhere in the story. Then, Monday morning came around, and Sylvia stepped out of her father's car into the entryway of the school and glanced around. Vanessa was not in her usual spot by the doors. She swallowed. Vanessa or her parents would have let her know if Vanessa had gone back to the hospital, right? She took a couple of steps closer to the entryway and looked around. Maybe Vanessa had stopped somewhere else. Looking for someone? A tired voice came from behind her, from where the car loop was. Sylvia spun around and grinned. Sylvia spun around and grinned. You're back! I am, Vanessa laughed. She seemed like her usual self, other than a drained color to her body. Sylvia wondered how much Vanessa was here and how much was really wishing she could be back in bed, and not for sleepiness purposes. Yeah, I'm gonna mark that for a revision. I am, Vanessa laughed. She seemed like her usual self, other than a drained color to her body. Miss me? A bit, Sylvia admitted, adjusting her backpack. Well, I'm back, Vanessa reiterated. I have a lot of classwork to catch up on. Want to walk me to my locker? Isn't Thomas supposed to do that? Sylvia asked. Well, until he shows up, I'm going to deputize you for the job. Vanessa smiled. Come on. She started down the main corridor to the lockers. Sylvia blinked. Weren't they going to hang out in the entrance for a bit like they normally do? Maybe Vanessa really did miss school. Ho ho ho. Vanessa, now several steps into the corridor, turned and looked curiously back at Sylvia. Hey, are you coming? I don't think this needs to be here. Yeah, sorry, Sylvia answered and hurried to catch up to her friend. They walked together in silence for a bit, even as they turned down the hallway where Vanessa's locker was situated. How was it? Sylvia finally asked quietly. How was what? The hospital? Oh, that, well... Do we need to talk about this? Anyway. Oh, that, well... Vanessa began thoughtfully as she opened her locker. Sylvia... Yeah, I'm gonna highlight this because I don't think that needs to be really discussed. Sylvia saw her park painting nested away in the safe spot where the books wouldn't be able to touch it, and could not help but smile. That phrase I don't like either. Vanessa finally put together her thought as she was moving all of her books from her locker into her backpack. Honestly, it was kind of boring and painful. You lay in bed and hope the pain machine does the job enough to... Sorry. Pain machine. Honestly, it was kind of boring and painful. You lay in bed and hope the pain medicine does the job enough to kill the pain, or at least reduce it to a level where you can maybe tolerate it. But they won't give you any more medicine until the first batch is worn off. So you start to feel the actual pain again, and then the medicine does the job to null most of the pain, and it just goes back and forth until your body is actually strong enough to handle the medicine without pain, or handle the pain without pain medicine. Sylvia frowned. Sounds rough. It was, Vanessa agreed, zipping up her backpack and closing her locker. I was able to watch television, but the sound of the system was awful, so I never really got to actually enjoy it. I tried reading or catching up on schoolwork, but a lot of the time the pain medicine made it really difficult to focus. All I wanted to do was sleep or just vibe. Is that how you feel? No, Sylvia said, blinking. I don't want to just sleep or vibe. I do legit have problems focusing, though. Sorry, Vanessa apologized. I meant if the focus was how you feel, not necessarily for the same reason. I can see how that came across wrong, though. It's fine. Vanessa let out a sigh. The first couple of days were the worst. I was able to catch up on some schoolwork on Thursday and Friday, but my doctor said that I shouldn't do too much at once because even doing schoolwork can stress me out and cause my body to have issues. Seriously? Sylvia blinked. Apparently it's a thing, Vanessa shrugged. I know I remember researching this, but I'm gonna mark that again. I thought he was just trying to be nice and maybe silly, but when he told my parents, he had that sort of serious tone to him that made it seem like he wasn't joking. Wow, Sylvia said. I wouldn't have imagined. Could you imagine how many kids would want to end up in? She trailed off at a disapproving look from Vanessa. It was just a joke, I promise. Like, a very bad joke. Vanessa shook her head. Two then started back down the hall to the main school corridor. Do you need to go to your locker? Yeah. Vanessa was for a moment. Was quiet for a moment. Okay, so what we'll do is... Excuse me, sorry for the noise. Okay, so what we'll do is I'll swing by my teacher's classes if they're open and see what I missed, and then I'll meet you at your locker. Sylvia blinked. Didn't you get a bunch of that already? The brunette shook her head. No, I got a bunch from Tuesday and Wednesday, but nothing from Thursday and Friday. I still need to collect it. I need to, like, how did she collect it? Did her parents pick it up, or what? Did you finish the stuff from the hospital? Vanessa shook her head again. No, but I have it all. But if I have it all, I should be able to use what I've done already to work on the new stuff. And then turn it all in at once. Excuse me. Wouldn't you just being in class today be enough? I figure when they go over the homework answers, it'll just be right there for you to figure out. So doing homework at that point is redundant. Maybe for some of it, Vanessa conceded. But Some classes aren't as easy as that. So, I have to go to talk to the teachers. Fine. Vanessa voiced her understanding as they made it to the main corridor. Sorry. I'll see you in a few. Wait, Vanessa said hurriedly before Sylvia can turn away. What? If it takes longer than I think, don't wait for me. Sylvia shrugged. If the bell rings, I'll get to class. That's how it's always been. You're my friend, but I'll miss class for you once per semester. That got a giggle from Vanessa. 2 S's. Okay, deal. At that point, the two girls parted ways, Sylvia to gather her school supplies for the first half of the day, and Vanessa to gather all of her missed work from the last 2 school days. Sylvia. April, it's Monday now, so it's 18th. Nope, other way. 22nd. The last one should. Anyway, this is why using dates for the chapters is not a great idea. Unless the chapter encompasses the full date. At lunch, Vanessa was much less talkative than she normally was. She spent more time looking down at the salad bowl in front of her than she did interacting with the people seated with her. Thomas, who had been joining Sylvia at their spot even without Vanessa present, looked over at Sylvia with concern in his eyes. Sylvia nodded and reached over to poke her friend in the hand. What? The brunette jumped at the sensation and looked directly across the table at Sylvia. What? You haven't reacted You haven't reacted at all to anything we've been saying, Sylvia explained. Vanessa let out a long, slow sigh and nodded. Excuse me. Sylvia was afraid she was not nodding and understanding, but rather was about to nod off to sleep. However, her friend proved that fear unreasonable as she said, with a subdued voice, Yeah. Sorry. I'm exhausted. Thomas and Sylvia looked at each other again, and this time Thomas spoke up. Are you sure you should be back at school if you're still under the weather? Vanessa turned to look at him and then nodded slowly. Yeah, you know me. I can't stand being away from people. She gave him a forced smile. Well, if you're sure, he replied with uncertainty. I remember earlier in the story we talked about her rarely having a forced smile, so I'm gonna take a look at that. Well, I am, she said. Her eyes darted toward Sylvia, but looking back at him, but looked back at him. Ended up looking. There we go. Hey, I want to talk to Sylvia alone for a couple minutes. Do you think you can help me out by throwing my lunch away for me? Thomas looked at Sylvia, then down at Vanessa's barely touched lunch. Are you sure you're He paused as he tried to reframe his question. Are you sure you don't want anything for later, maybe? I can see if they have plastic boxes to carry it home in. The school had a program that allowed students to box up anything they didn't finish from their lunches, so they could eat it later whenever they were in a position to do so. The only exception was soups, as the school did not want to risk soup spillage. Sylvia gave him a sweet, but obviously tired smile. That's actually a great idea, she complimented. Can you do that for me? Of course. Excuse me. Sylvia turned away as Thomas leaned over to give Vanessa a quick peck on the lips. As soon as she could see him moving away from their table in her peripheral vision, She turned back to face Vanessa. So, I'm gonna highlight that. Not terrible, but I think it can be readjusted. So, did you tell him? She asked, worry in her voice. No, I wouldn't do that, Sylvia assured her friend. Then, how does he know? Vanessa, you've been out of school for most of last week. He was dogging me on where you were. I'm not about to tell him your business, but I had to tell him something. Sylvia glanced toward where Thomas had gone off to, a station set up where students could grab condiments, napkins, and other items needed for their lunch. It was there where the boxes were also set up. So, what did you tell him? Vanessa asked. Let's take the leftover. Just that you've fallen ill, Sylvia answered honestly. I didn't elaborate on what it was you had. I think he assumed you got some sort of flu, but I don't know for certain. Oh, Vanessa whispered, and then nodded as she spoke. Thank you. Of course. I just had a thought. I need to come back over here. Vanessa should definitely have Tom's number, so that line is not needed. Where was I? Just that you've fallen ill, Sylvia answered honestly. I didn't elaborate on what it was you had. I think he assumed you got some sort of flu, but I don't know for certain. Oh, Vanessa whispered, and then nodded as she spoke. Thank you. Of course. Vanessa turned toward the cart where Thomas had been waiting. He was passing a small see-through, plastic box from one hand to another, back and forth and back and forth. She waved to him. I don't think we need that alliteration, really. She waved to him, and once he noticed her motion, he returned the gesture and made his way back to the table. How was the girl talk? He asked as he returned, handing the box to Vanessa. Vanessa took the box and began to savor salad in it. The entire bowl wouldn't fit in the box. The box was never intended to hold a full meal, just the leftovers. But she was able to get at least half of the salad inside. She placed a couple of pouches, one with salted sunflower seeds and another with Italian dressing on top of the salad. Well, she started. It was good. Oh, that's right, for her post-hospital stay, she starts off her sentences with some sort of leading something. That's right, I forgot about that. So, up here... we're going to get rid of that. Too far! Well, it was good. He nodded. Anything juicy to talk about? Vanessa, despite her obvious exhaustion, gave him a coy smile. If we were going to share it with you, don't you think I wouldn't have asked you to step away for a moment? That is both cute and hard to read at the same time. Oh, he chuckled. I want to say that he, as it was spelled out for him or something. Sylvia smiled. She had a feeling he knew that there were no... Reading is hard, guys. Sorry. Sylvia smiled. She had a feeling he knew that there was no answer to his question, but was just trying to play along anyway. Well, maybe I don't need to highlight that. We'll tell you on one condition, Sylvia said, a grin appearing on her face. What's that? Sorry, what's that? Thomas asked. What? Sylvia? Vanessa piped up, panic in her voice. Sylvia waved off Vanessa with a wink. You carry around Vanessa's books for the rest of the semester, and we'll tell you what we were talking about. She was certain that he wasn't going to accept something as crazy as that. He had his own classes to get to and worry about. And, in the event that he does last through the end of the semester, it was very likely that either Vanessa would have told him by graduation, if he was still with her, or that she would have forgotten most of the conversation, so there would not be anything really to share with him. I'm gonna cut this part out. Or rework it or something. I just don't like how it's kind of spoilery, but it's also kind of realistic, honestly. Get on board with that stipulation. Vanessa relaxed, not knowing why Sylvia brought it up, and looked at Thomas. Well, that's assuming. He looked like he was in thought, his finger crooked under his chin. Sorry, he eventually answered. As tempting as that is, I'm going to have to pass. Logistically, that's impossible with my class load. Vanessa shrugged. My boss. He grinned. Maybe I'll figure it out on my own. Unlikely, Sylvia said. We are very good at making sure people don't know what we say, she bragged. And how is that? He asked. We forget everything as soon as we say it. Hee hee hee. Alright, so Sylvia, it's Wednesday, so 2 days later, April 24th. By Wednesday the same week, Vanessa had made substantial strides in her school day endurance, and was able to get through the majority of the day without even seeming to be exhausted. After the final bell rang, Sylvia quickly visited her locker to swap out her books, and then made her way over to her friend's locker. Vanessa was there, as predicted, and of course Thomas was also there with her now. Her books were in his hands as he helped her sort them for her evening's homework. Hey, Sylvia greeted them as she slipped out of the sea of students and walked over to the locker. Hey, Vanessa greeted in turn, and Thomas gave her a friendly nod. Sylvia, Vanessa said, turning around in her spot to face the blonde. Oh. What's the formatting color? Hold on. Bright pink, okay. What's up? I need to let you know something, she said, slowly and hesitantly. What's that? Sylvia asked, tilting her head in concern. The last time she said something like that, a week and a half ago, Thomas had been invited to sit with them at the lunch table. On that same day, some TikToker by the name of Best Ideas called in a bomb threat for the school, even though the kid, all news media said he was a juvenile and so couldn't disclose his age, lived in another state. The bomb threat contributed to the events that left Vanessa in the hospital for several days. She was certain Vanessa's news today wouldn't lead to anything like it did last week, not that the news was any sort of factor in it, but she was still wary about the phrasing she had used. I'm not going to the car loop today, Vanessa said, nervousness in her voice. Why not? Vanessa looked at Thomas and then back to Sylvia. Tom's driving me home. Sylvia blinked. Oh, well, cool. You two play nice, okay? Vanessa nodded, a shy smile creeping up on her face. We will. Sylvia had so many questions for Vanessa, but decided it wasn't anything she should ask while Thomas was present. Instead, she smiled and shifted her backpack. You'd better, she quipped, otherwise I'm joining next time. Thomas laughed and Vanessa just blushed. Then they all fell quiet. After a few moments of awkward silence, Sylvia realized it was time for her to bow out, and she stepped away. Alright, you two have fun, okay? Drive safe. And Vanessa, I'll send a message later? Sounds good, Vanessa agreed before turning back to her locker and to Thomas. Sylvia let her gaze linger on the two of them for just a moment before turning around and walking toward the main corridor. She had felt jealousy before, so she knew exactly that's what she's feeling now. Her friend, her new best friend who she'd gone through so many ups and downs with in just this half a year alone, for the first time since they had become friends, without any injury or other malady getting in the way, was not going to be at the car pickup loop with her. This feels so forced and I hate it, but it's also real? Does that make sense? Oh, stretching. Sorry. Yeah, and it's also kind of worry. But even thinking that, she felt much worse. She knew that Vanessa liked Thomas and vice versa. The remarkable thing was that Vanessa had to let her parents know that someone was driving her home so that they wouldn't be picking her up. That meant, Sylvia knew, actually highlight that because I wanted that to be realized, not new, that she had told them that someone was driving her home. Knowing how protective her parents were, Vanessa had to put up some sort of convincing argument to get them to allow her to be driven home by someone else. Even if she didn't tell them she was romantically interested in them. Let me start over. Even if she didn't tell them she was romantically interested in him, or that it was even a him to begin with, Sylvia was sure they would be up in arms in protection of Vanessa, especially after what happened last week. I think I'm probably going to rephrase this. Or, Sylvia considered, maybe after what happened last week, they were more understanding of Vanessa's wishes. If she truly didn't have much time, then what harm would it be to allow her to drive home once in a while with her friend, or even a boyfriend? Sylvia realized this was all theoretical, and she recognized that she was imagining the discussion between Sylvia and her parents in her head. It's possible they didn't know at all, and might drop by the school to try and pick her up. However, Sylvia seriously doubted that Vanessa would be that inconsiderate of her parents. I wanna highlight this. This might not even be needed. She probably got permission yesterday, which is why Thomas is driving her home today. Sylvia sighed through her nostrils. I'm going to actually highlight that because that is kind of weird too. She was happy for Vanessa, really. She knew she liked that boy, and she was finally getting a modicum of freedom that she typically didn't seem to have until very recently. What bothered her, she realized, was not that Vanessa would not be hanging out with her at the pickup loop, but rather that Vanessa didn't let her know until the last minute that she would be driven home by Thomas. Even as she came to the realization, her stomach knotted up. It should be as she came to the realization, but it is what it is. Vanessa tried to warn Sylvia last week about Thomas and the lunch table, but didn't get to. Today, she just didn't even let Sylvia know at all about what was going on. Why? Was she distracted by Thomas? Sylvia didn't think so, but she couldn't be certain. Did she think Sylvia would actually be jealous about Thomas if she had known? Sylvia was not jealous. I'm gonna... either consistency, because I literally said 5 paragraphs ago that she wasn't jealous, or that she was jealous. Or, I think I want to do a bit of both. Sylvia was not jealous. She was not even mad. She was just disappointed. I'm just gonna highlight the rest of this and just be like, do we want this? Alright. Sylvia, April 24th. Evening. Later that night, Sylvia sat at the breakfast table with her phone in her hands. There was a cup of milk off to the side that she had intended to drink not long ago in order to help her fall asleep. She had completely disregarded that, however, once she picked up her phone and realized she forgot to send Vanessa a message like she promised to do. So, now in the evening, Sylvia was staring like, what did she get involved with in the meantime? So, now in the evening, Sylvia was staring at her device, ready to type and send a message. Any message. But nothing was coming to mind. I'm going to highlight this for formatting. Instead, she just kept asking herself, is it too late? Asking questions to herself. I like that better. Is it too late? What if Vanessa's asleep already? What if Thomas is there? What if I say something and she gets mad at me for it? Why hasn't she sent me any messages? Those messages played out in her mind over and over again, with varying levels of worry and accusation. In the end, she typed out YT and hit send. Once she had sent the message, she set the phone down on the table in front of her and leaned back in her chair. Her eyes were only focused on the phone, as if she was willing Vanessa to respond to it in the next few moments. As if on cue, the phone buzzed with reply. Yeah, be quick. Should be resting. Can't chat long. Sylvia nodded to herself, understanding the situation Vanessa was in. Even if her parents were granting her some more latitude in the people she hung out with, they were very likely still imposing the rest mandate the doctors advised of. Let's just say ordered here. Sylvia typed out one question, though. Typed out one question. We're gonna just rework all that. Sylvia typed out one question, thought that it was not great in the middle of typing it, and so erased it and repeated the action 3 more times before she finally sent, "Can we talk tomorrow, you and I, before school?" The response, "Sure." Sylvia sighed and felt a slight wave of relief come over her. She didn't want to interrupt any time Vanessa needed to rest, and with how late it was already, sometime after 9, she was sure that any more messages would be an interruption. I'm gonna highlight this for rework. I'm gonna step away for a minute, guys. I will be right back. About that, y'all. Had to step away from the computer for a minute or two. Alright. Where was I? We got about 2 hours. Well, under 2 hours at this point. I've been streaming for about an hour. So we got about 4 done. So 8 more to go. Ish. Alright, Sylvia sighed and felt a slight wave of relief come over her. She didn't want to interrupt any time Vanessa needed to rest, and with how late it was already, sometime after 9, she was sure that any more messages would be an interruption. She could also probably call, but talking this late would not only keep Vanessa up, 2 S's. I'm actually going to do this. Hold on. Find and replace. All. Alright, back to this. She could also probably call, but talking this late would not only keep Vanessa up, but she would be heard easily by her parents who were trying to sleep. And we're gonna just rework this too, I guess. Finally noticing her abandoned cup of milk, Sylvia grabbed it and took a sip. Grabbed it? I don't like that. Grabbed it and took a sip and immediately gagged. This is disgusting! She couldn't help but shout. As soon as the words left her mouth, she paused and looked over at her parents' room. No sound came from it, but she still decided to call out, "Sorry, nothing to worry about. I'll take care of it." After waiting a few more moments to confirm there was nothing coming from her parents' room, Sylvia stood, grabbed the offending room temperature milk, and carried it into the kitchen so she could toss it down the sink. Although she intended to just toss the liquid into the sink, her finger slipped as she made the tossing motion, and the glass quickly followed the white liquid. Shoot! You know, most people curse, so I'm gonna go ahead and do it. I'm doing it! Shit! Sylvia cursed as the glass shattered in the sink into large and small shards. I'm gonna highlight that for rework. She couldn't see her parents' door now to look at it in fear, but she still strained to listen to see if there was any reaction to the shattering glass just now. I'm gonna highlight that for potential rework. As she listened, she grabbed a plastic bag and started to pick up the shattered glass pieces and toss them into the bag. This time, there was a reaction from one of her parents. "Sylvia?" her dad's tired voice called from where their room was. "Dropped something. Sorry, I'll clean it up." She looked up as she called back. What she intended to do was pinch a large shard of the remainder of the cup with her pinky and Pinky? Yeah, I don't know why I wrote pinky. That's kind of impossible. Unless it was like really thick. With her thumb and forefinger so she could place it into the plastic bag. But, yeah, I'm gonna actually add a but here. But because she was now no longer focused on the task and was still working as she was replying to her dad, what she ended up doing was reaching down and then feeling a pressure against the palm of her hand, ending with a poking feeling at the meatier portion of her palm. Immediately drawing her hand back at the poke, she yelped and grasped it with her other hand. That's when she felt how wet it was. Hey, Wise Books! Editing's coming along, well. Thank you for asking. Just doing the markups right now, and then we'll go through and work around those markups. How are you doing? Let's see. Immediately drawing her hand back at the poke, she yelped and grasped it with her other hand. That's when she felt how wet it was. "Sylv?" Her father's voice called again from the room, still sleepy, but this time also sounding very concerned. Good, I'm glad to hear that you're doing well. Sylvia did not answer her father in a timely manner. Instead, she turned her hand over and blanched as she saw the gash that stretched nearly the entire width of her palm, and the red blood that was freely flowing from it. She stammered, unsure how to answer him without raising any alarm, or if she should just tell him what happened. I overall like it. I don't like how that ends, though. She didn't have to ponder that decision much further. Before she realized it, he was in the kitchen, in his bathrobe, and immediately pressing a wad of paper towels to the gash. "Sylv, can you hear me?" he asked. Blinking, Sylvia looked up at her dad. "Dad?" Alright, that's a little redundant. He breathed a sigh of relief. You were unresponsive for a moment there. I was afraid you'd gone into shock or something. Sorry, she said weakly, looking back down at the wad of paper towels that her dad was pressing down against her hand. His other hand was pressing her injured hand up into the paper towels to keep pressure. What happened? He asked. Sylvia felt like he might have said that more than once, but this was the first time she recognized the question. Sorry, she stammered and looked at the sink. Dropped the cup. When I tried cleaning it, I think I noticed, her dad answered, and then shook his head with a sigh. Oh, thank you for the Ray Tiger rights. I appreciate that. And welcome in, everybody. How is everyone doing? He breathed a sigh of relief. Oh, whoops. We'll back up here. He breathed a sigh of relief. You were unresponsive for a moment there. I was afraid that you had gone into shock or something. Sorry, she said weakly, looking back down at the wad of paper towels that her dad was pressing down against her hand. His other hand was pressing her injured hand up into the paper towels to keep pressure. I think I'm gonna rework that. Oh, and thank you for the follow. I appreciate that too. Good, had a good day. Oh, a good day's always good to have. That's awesome. Glad to hear it. The editing is coming along very well. Editing is usually where I get tripped up when it comes to story writing. So I've decided to incorporate it into my streaming to make sure that it does get done. And so far, it's doing pretty well. I do the markups first, and then I'm going to go through with the markups and then do all the pruning and reworking as needed. Yeah! I'll be sure to get you added too. I've got a few others that have come in through NaNoWriMo, but, or novel challenges as I call it this year, but yeah. Absolutely. Always glad to network with other writers. What happened? He asked. Sylvia felt like he might have said that more than once, but this was the first time she recognized the question. Sorry, she stammered and looked at the sink. Dropped the cup. When I tried cleaning it, I think I noticed. Why does he ask that if... consistency. Her dad answered and then shook his head with a sigh. I won't ask any more questions after this, but do you think you can keep the pressure on this? He indicated the wad of paper towels. I think so, she answered, setting her free hand on top of his, and then applying pressure as he slipped his hand free. She tried curling her fingers around the paper towel wad. I think we can start reducing that a little bit at this point. And immediately winced with a hiss as fiery pain shot through the fingers. Careful, her father cautioned. You've got a pretty bad cut there. I don't think it's anything you need to go to the ER for, but your hand's going to be pretty sore for the next while. If the pain hadn't brought Sylvia back to her senses, that statement certainly did. She sharply turned her head toward her father. What do you mean? Just that, he said with a shrug as he started to clean up the broken glass that caused the injury. It's going to be tough for, I'm going to rework this whole thing. It's going to be tough for you to use your fingers for anything. Sylvia shook her head. No, she repeated herself. I can't. I use this hand. For everything, she stammered. She looked back down at the ball of paper towels that she was holding down into her palm as redness was starting to peek from some of the lower folds. Her dad smiled apologetically, not turning his gaze from the task at hand. Sorry, kiddo. Sometimes you just have to roll with the punches. But I can't write, or paint, or text, she argued. Not for now, he agreed. But in a few days you'll be able to do some of it. It might be rough, but it's not for forever. But it's not forever. Nor will it be for an extended amount of time. He paused. I hope. What do you mean, you hope? He shrugged. I'm no hand doctor, but I understand that there are a lot of nerves involved in the hand, so... Sylvia, already pale from the loss of blood, glanced further at the thought of not being able to use her dominant hand. I won't be able to use it? It's a very distinct rarity, her father tried to cautiously say. Could it happen? Sure. Will it happen? Probably not. You're no relief, she said flatly as she looked at him. Let's get you bandaged up and in bed, he said, changing the topic slightly. I'll take care of the cleanup here. I'm actually going to make a note for future, or when we actually get into the rework. Because the mom's the nurse, or the wannabe nurse. Alright. Celia, April 25th. What happened? Vanessa asked as she watched Sylvia walk up to her with her right hand bandaged up. Don't like the way that's written. Sliced my hand open, she explained rather sullenly. Going to specify that's Sylvia. Vanessa winced. No, that's the wrong color. Vanessa winced. Ouch, I'm sorry about that. Or sorry about that. Not your fault, Sylvia shrugged. These things happen, or so I'm told. Vanessa nodded in response, still looking concerned about her friend's hand, but not commenting on it any further. So, she began instead, what did you want to talk about? Shit. Sylvia realized she completely forgot that she wanted to talk to Vanessa this morning about Thomas. She wasn't in any mood to have that discussion now, after having been awake most of the night last night from the pain in her hand. The painkillers her dad gave her worked for the most part, but the throbbing never went away. Sylvia thought about changing the subject, or seeing if maybe they could shelve the topic for a later discussion. It was fruitless, though, she had decided. That was a weird phrase. Hold on. The longer it gets put off, the less likely she'll want to bring it up. Plus, she reminded herself, if Vanessa was really going to be gone shortly after graduation, then this was the best time to talk about this. It's going to sound dumb and petty, Sylvia cautioned, looking away from her friend. Why? Vanessa asked. Sylvia pouted. She really didn't want to say why. She knew exactly how it would sound. But she also wanted to know Vanessa's reasoning about why she didn't let her know about going home with Thomas. Promise you won't get mad if I ask? Vanessa shook her head. I can't promise anything until I know why you're asking. She leaned back and crossed her arms over her chest. Fine, Sylvia sighed. Her eyes were suddenly fixated on a brown spot on the otherwise whitewashed wall behind Vanessa. I was just curious. About? Vanessa prompted. Sylvia swallowed and finally asked her question. Why didn't you let me know that you were going home with Thomas yesterday? I feel like this is kind of weird. Because she did let her know at the last minute. Vanessa sighed and let out a softly spoken, I knew it. Sylvia looked up at her and tilted her head. You knew what? Vanessa shook her head and shrugged. I knew you were going to be upset that I didn't let you know. Again, she let her know at the last minute. I'm not upset. Sylvia tried to correct the record. I'm just... She shook her head, trying to find the words. I just feel hurt that you didn't tell me that what you're wanting to do until it actually happened. You've had, like, several chances to tell me yesterday, or even Tuesday, but you didn't. Because I knew you'd act like this. No, Sylvia countered. I'm acting like this because you didn't tell me until the last minute. Before Vanessa could say anything else, she sniped in, I'm actually happy you got to do that. I just wish you trusted me to tell me about it instead of ambushing me. Vanessa blinked, processing what Sylvia was laying at her feet. She then shook her head. Ambushing you? How did I ambush you? You didn't tell me until... words. You didn't tell me until the last bell went off, Sylvia pointed out. At least I told you. Yeah, because I went to your locker. What if I had gone to the loop instead? Or waited for you at my locker? Or got held up after class? Vanessa frowned. You always come to my locker after school. I knew you'd show up. We would have waited, she argued her point. That's not the point, Sylvia said, feeling drained just from that small argument. I feel like you didn't trust me enough to let me know at all. Vanessa looked away. I trust you plenty. You know a lot about me that a lot of other people don't know, she pointed out. Why didn't you tell me then? I did. Before I went to your locker, Sylvia reiterated. Why didn't you tell me you were going to try to get your parents to let him drive you? Vanessa swallowed. She took some time before answering, though she still avoided looking in Sylvia's direction. Because I knew you'd be jealous, she answered, her voice dry. I'm not jealous, Sylvia reiterated. Then why are you acting like this? Vanessa whirled to face her now. Like what? Like you're jealous, and you need to know everything that I do. I don't need to know everything that you do. You're certainly acting like it, Vanessa spat. You kept me in the dark and I didn't like it, Sylvia countered. I don't have to tell you everything that I do, Vanessa said, with an edge to her tone. I never said you did. And yet, here we are, you being upset because I didn't tell you that I wanted Thomas. She calls him Tom, not Thomas. There might be a few other points in the conversation where I need to edit that too, but good catch, good catch. And yet, here we are, you being upset because I didn't tell you that I wanted Tom to drive me home instead of going to the car loop with you. Vanessa threw one of her hands in the air, the other grasping onto her backpack. And I would have understood. Sylvia felt like she was becoming a broken record. But you were upset. I'm upset, Sylvia was trying her best to avoid raising her voice. Because you didn't tell me until the very last moment that you could, without completely abandoning me, and now you're upset because I was asking you why you didn't trust me enough to tell me in the first place. She felt her breath quickening. You think I don't trust you? Vanessa asked, her voice soft now, instead of sharp. I know there's a lot of going back and forth on this conversation, but that's how arguments typically are. Sylvia shook her head. I feel like... She sighed. I feel like... The first bell interrupted Sylvia, ringing to inform the students that they had 10 minutes to get to class. They had been arguing instead of doing their normal morning routine. Vanessa looked conflicted. She looked toward the doorway and toward the corridor, and then looked back at Sylvia, who was thrown off by the noise and still trying to piece together what she was about to say. Well, Vanessa ended up saying instead, her voice low and strained. I feel like we need to spend some time apart. Later, Sylvia, she said, before turning and walking into the school without her blonde friend. Sylvia watched Vanessa's brunette ponytail sway side to side as she made her way into the throng of students trying to get their affairs in order before class started. Fuck. 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 Fuckity fuck? I'm I'm sure, like, if this got made into a movie, a director and an actor can make better use out of that. Anyway, next chapter. Okay. I hate all this white space, but that's fine. I'll live with it. Sylvia, April 25th. When's the next action piece? That school day was unbearable. Not only did Sylvia feel awfully emotionally. Not only did Sylvia feel awful emotionally. Yeah, that's just gonna have to be reworked. From her fight with Vanessa, but also physically from her lack of sleep and her throbbing hand. Exams were coming up fast, and the teachers were now pivoting from end-of-semester lessons to exam preparation. That meant that many teachers were giving lectures and recommending students take copious notes on top of whatever was already taken during the school year or semester. Sylvia had sliced her dominant hand, which meant writing was not an option. From her first class onward, she had asked the teacher if she could utilize an audio recorder for the lectures. I'm actually going to mark this for elaboration because she only had, that she brought to school or in her phone. But each class had refused to allow her. It was notes or nothing. Maybe, her third period teacher, Mr. Bruns, suggested, you can ask someone to copy their notes for you. Yeah, I need to do better with the title, or chapter titles. Oh, heads up, Twitch viewers, there is an ad incoming in the next 2 or 3 minutes. It wasn't a bad idea, Sylvia acknowledged. She would have to identify which other students in the classes would be a good option to ask. Vanessa came to mind first, but that quickly faded as she remembered that they were currently not on speaking terms. This week sucks, Sylvia muttered to herself as she moved from third period toward her fourth period class. Standing in line outside of the class, she tried to refocus her mind. She needed to stop worrying about her friend, or ex-friend, and figure out who else she can speak to about getting notes for finals. Ouch! A male voice spoke up as he stood beside her in line. Sylvia glanced over at him and noticed it was Elmo Reniger, one of the boys in the It's me, it's not the text. One of the boys in this literature class with her. Although I do agree that this line is kind of redundant. So maybe we'll just mark that for rework. She didn't know too much about him. He had started attending Seminole High School a couple years ago, but she never really had anything beyond the literature classes with him. He seemed like a smart student, but he was often quiet. He was relatively tall, compared to her, with black, straight hair, pale skin, and kind of a pointed nose. Why am I describing him? Sylvia thought to herself that if he were a female, he would look kind of like a stereotypical witch. However, as it was, he was a male. It was also unfortunate that his name was Elmo, as it earned him some sort of stigma due to a popular children's show. We're gonna rework that a bunch. What happened? He asked her as soon as he noticed her glancing his way. He pointed toward the bandaged hand. Oh, she glanced down at her hand. Sliced it open by picking up glass. Gotta be careful how you hold it, he explained. Those corners can get you. I noticed, Sylvia nodded, and then stuck her hand in her pocket. She glanced away from Elmo and saw a couple out of the corner of her eye in the distance. Thomas and Vanessa. She closed her eyes and tried to block the image, but she couldn't. Thomas was walking Vanessa to class. He was being polite and chivalrous, and Vanessa was taking in every moment of his attention. Sylvia was not jealous. At least that's what she was telling herself. She was very happy that Vanessa was able to find someone like him to make her happy. Still, she got pangs of sadness when she saw them walking toward the classroom door. It wasn't jealousy, Sylvia kept telling herself. Might be too redundant. She was just upset. Here, She was just upset that her friend was upset with her, and that they would probably not talk again for a while. Sylvia frowned. What was a while? If she and Vanessa didn't reconcile soon, preferably by the end of the school day, or graduation at the latest, then would she even be able to actually reconcile? She and Vanessa really only hung out at school, and only very recently did they get the green light to hang out periodically outside of school. The last week's hospital visit stopped those extracurricular hangouts. I think I'm going to rework this. It's technically not wrong, but also technically not right. The school was, once again, the only place where she and Vanessa could really hang out and talk about things. Even texting or calling, which she could still do, was restricted due to Vanessa's rest in bed order from the doctor. AKA bed rest. This meant that only during school, literature, lunch, economics, sometimes between classes, and the car loop before and after school, were the only times they would get to hang out. And one of the car loop options wasn't on the table anymore if Vanessa was being driven home by Thomas on a regular basis. Heck, Sylvia realized as she saw them interact down the hall. Apparently one of Thomas's classes wasn't too was not too far away. Vanessa was back to being only a school-only friend now. Yeah, we're just gonna rework this whole thing. And now, assuming Thomas had the same time restrictions when speaking with Vanessa after school as she did, Vanessa was forced to spend her time with him only during school and drive home. That meant, even if Sylvia and Vanessa didn't have their fight, Vanessa was forced to pick and choose who she would be spending her free time with during school with. And, Sylvia had to imagine, her evening calls and texts were also similarly divided. Vanessa's time was a finite supply, but demand far exceeded that capacity. Excuse me. Sylvia shook her head. Stupid economics, she muttered to herself. She looked up again and saw Vanessa walking in her direction, or rather, in the direction of the door as it opened to allow students into class. Hey, Elmo? Sylvia found herself asking suddenly, her eyes on Vanessa as the brunette pretended not to notice her. What's up? Since I can't take notes like this, can I borrow yours for the exam? Alright. Sylvia, April 25th. Economics. We're getting into the last stretch of the story before rewrites and things like that, and before the actual edits start to take place and take shape. Economics was wrapping up, and Sylvia was carefully placing her book into her bag with her left hand to avoid any further injury to her right hand. It wasn't too difficult. She had a finger hooked into the zipper to keep the backpack open, and she gingerly wiggled the textbook into the bag in the space between her math book and the fabric of the backpack. We're going to rework that. Although it wasn't difficult, it was slower than she would like. Finally, as she finished zipping up the pack, the bell rang to end class, and the students all stood, gathered their things, and began to shuffle out of the room. Somehow, in the shuffle, Sylvia found herself behind Vanessa and inwardly winced. She wanted to say something about the lecture. She wanted to ask her if she could borrow her notes for the exam. Either way, she wasn't going to speak with Vanessa. No, the brunette was pointedly looking everywhere but over her shoulder toward Sylvia. It was almost infuriating, the way Vanessa was ignoring her. At least a couple weeks ago, when Vanessa's parents tried to end their friendship, Vanessa was avoiding Sylvia out of sadness. Was it a couple weeks ago? Yeah, I guess it was. Now it seemed like Vanessa was actively doing her best to ignore that Sylvia even existed. I don't like the way that I phrased that. Fine. If she wanted to be that way, she could. Vanessa wasn't the only one who could pretend like someone didn't exist. Sylvia had gotten along very well with many of the other students before Vanessa came along. She could continue those relationships with ease. That's also kind of oddly put together. It would be like Vanessa had never come around. However, none of those friends were in this class, or around it as the group was released into the highway. Highway? I also don't know if that's phrased. As the group was released into the hallway. Sylvia left the classroom, looked around for people she knew, ones that weren't Vanessa, and saw no one, and started toward her next class. "Hey, Sylvia!" someone called. She paused and turned around at the attention. "What?" It was someone from her economics class, a girl who was pretty popular with the boys. Her name, ironically, was Chastity. I don't like that. It feels catty to me. I don't like it. I want to say... Prudence. I don't know. I think I gave her a different name later on in the story too, so we'll see. I'll mark her as a, as a continuity thing. She looked like she came out of a magazine. Her dark blonde hair was long and straight without any signs of getting caught in anything throughout the day. That's more of a me thing than a story thing. Plus, it would be more helpful if Sylvia's hair got stuck in stuff, and I never really mentioned that. She wore a skin-tight white shirt and jean shorts with an embroidered rose on the hip. This girl was someone Sylvia barely interacted with, and so Sylvia was very confused about why she was calling out to her now. "Did you hurt yourself on purpose to avoid taking notes?" The girl jeered at her. Sylvia flushed. She and the economics teacher never got along. We're going to have to give the economics teacher's name here. She and the economics teacher never got along when it came to how Sylvia preferred to learn. The economics teacher insisted that the best way for Sylvia, or any student, to learn was just to listen and take notes. Unfortunately, this teacher preferred to lecture and didn't really teach from the book, which made following along difficult for Sylvia if she had to take notes. For teachers who lectured, resting her head down and envisioning what was being said was generally best. But this teacher refused to allow her. However, since Sylvia showed up with a bandaged hand, today the teacher was compelled to allow her to learn how she felt best, even if the teacher didn't agree with it. Do you really think I do this on purpose just before exams? Sylvia answered. Her patience was wearing thin. She should just turn around and ignore the girl, but instead she felt compelled to respond. Overall, I think this is good. Maybe out of order, maybe add something else. We'll see. Maybe that's how long it took you to come up with the idea, she said, with another girl near her, Melissa, laughing. Give the she a name, or name the she. We don't know. We just know that you finally got around to pissing off the teacher. I'm sure your exam will be even harder than everyone else's because of that. She started to walk past Sylvia and patted her shoulder. We all know that's fake, and you'll be fine by the time the exam comes around. She then pushed the shoulder as if launching herself away from Sylvia with emotion. Typo. And continued to walk with her friend down the hall. It's not fake, Sylvia muttered, looking down at her injury that was just insulted. I know I wrote that to try to be cheeky, you know, we could pun on insult to injury. Did not work well here. The bleeding had stopped overnight, but it was still bandaged just in case. I wish it was. Shaking her head in a futile effort to ignore the teasing, Sylvia turned back around to make her way toward math class. As she was walking, she saw Thomas and Vanessa off to the side. She was probably imagining it, but as she noticed the two of them, it looked like Vanessa had turned her head away from Sylvia's general direction. Thomas, meanwhile, looked momentarily confused and kept up whatever conversation he was holding with her. Sylvia shook her head again and resumed her pace down the hallway to math class. She had no one to distract her, not anymore, so she walked at a leisurely pace, finding her mind wandering as she walked. Vanessa and Thomas were happy. Maybe Vanessa no longer needed Sylvia. Was Sylvia just an emotional stepping stone until Vanessa found a boyfriend or someone better? Her stomach turned at the thought. That'd definitely be it. We're going to just highlight that. Vanessa was a much nicer girl than that. And sometimes she was a bit naive, but she wouldn't purposefully use anyone like a stepping stone. At least she hadn't seen anything like that from Vanessa before they had become friends. Though, in honesty, she barely paid attention to Vanessa before they became friends. She tried avoiding her at one point, too. Did Vanessa have any friends to speak of before they became friends? I want to revamp this part. Sylvia had presumed not, simply because Vanessa didn't address anyone else as a friend when they were starting to get friendly. That feels weird. Now that she thought back on it, she realized that she just simply did not pay enough attention to see if Vanessa had ever walked to class or was speaking with anyone else in class. It made sense, though, that if Vanessa was the type to make a friend and then dump them, that friend wouldn't just lay down and take it. They'd probably have said something, and Sylvia would have noticed at some point. At least, that's what she would like to think. Isn't she just laying down and taking it now? She frowned. Vanessa said they should spend some time apart from each other. Vanessa thought that she was jealous, but Sylvia didn't think that. Sylvia was just concerned that Vanessa was not thinking about Sylvia's feelings in the matter. Oh shoot, Sylvia said under her breath, pivoting around and making her way back to the math class that she passed a couple of doors ago. Alright. I can't type. Sylvia. April 25th. And then after school. know what I just did. Here, hold on. There we go. There we go. Scrolling up. Adjusting me and myself in my seat. Are you and Vanessa no longer friends again? Sylvia's mother's voice interrupted Sylvia's brooding thought. I'll fix that to home. What made you think that? Sylvia asked as she reached over and picked up the television remote. You've been staring at that blank screen for the last 5 minutes, her mother pointed out, her finger pointing toward the blank television screen. The last time you were like this, you two had that issue with your parents. Sylvia frowned and nodded. Yeah, she said. Except this time, I think it's my fault. But I don't really think it's my But I don't think it's really my fault. Vanessa says I'm jealous. Sylvia spoke rapidly toward her mother. At that moment, Sylvia blinked and looked her mother up and down. Why are you wearing scrubs? Sylvia's mother grinned and spun around in a circle in the living room, showing off her teal scrubs. You like them? They're just scrubs, Sylvia said, looking her mom up and down. Really? No, sometimes you gotta get words out, you gotta get them out. Did you have to wear them to work today? I did not, but, she said, her grin getting bigger, I do have to wear them for my nursing class tonight. Sylvia sat up on the couch, her legs folding under her. You have a class tonight? Her mother nodded. I spoke with someone about getting my nursing certification renewed after all these years. I'm gonna highlight all of this because I need to research it. They said that I can get many basics waived, but techniques and other newer classes that have gone mainstream since I left the field need to be taken before I can become certified again. That's great, Sylvia said, then blinked. Wait, did college start already? Sylvia's mother chuckled and shook her head. No, this is a different program. It's an accelerated program designed for people in my position. It only runs for about 3 months, so I've got to make sure I'm there for every class. Oh. So I definitely messed up on that later in the story. That's great, Mom, Sylvia beamed. I'm happy for you. Though, that reminds me. She trailed off. She was just now remembering what Thomas said a week or so ago about enrolling in the community college. Reminds you? Her mother put her hands on her hips and asked, in a more stern manner, Reminds you of what? What did you forget this time? Sylvia winced. Her mother knew her well enough that if she was reminded of something, she very likely forgot something important. Like the art portfolio last year. Well, Thomas, she felt weird saying that name out loud after what impact his presence had with her friend with Vanessa. That doesn't even make sense. But it also wasn't his fault. A schoolmate of mine, she clarified. He mentioned he's going to community college for theater. I thought if he could do that for performing arts, maybe I can do that for painting. That's certainly something you can do, her mom mused. I would want you to go for something else, though, if you're going to community college. But Mom, I don't want to go to school for nursing or plumbing or anything like that. I just want to go for art. Her mother sighed. You don't have to just get a certification like that. But if you're going for art, I'd prefer you also pick up some other skills that you can take to a workplace while you wait for your art career to take off. Like what? Sylvia asked. Her mother shrugged. I don't know. Maybe take a couple of computer programming courses, or accounting. Sylvia made a face. I don't like that stuff. What do you like, other than art? Sylvia's mother challenged her. Sylvia huffed and thought back to school. Most classes she felt rather neutral about, and she didn't particularly enjoy any of them. I don't know, she said. Other than art, I don't think I like any of my classes any more than the others. Other than art, I don't like any of my classes any more than the others. I don't like the way that's written. Try not to think about it in terms of classes, Sylvia's mother said as she walked over to a mirror that was hanging on a wall and started to pull her hair back into a tight bun. What do you mean? Sylvia asked. What do you enjoy doing when you're in classes at school? What makes you more interested in the subject? Hands-on projects? Sylvia answered, unsure about what her mother was getting at. And you want to avoid a hands-on job? Painting is hands-on. Her mother sighed. Other than art. What's the word for it? I don't want a vocation. I just want art. This feels weird. Let me ask you this. Sylvia's mother tried a different tactic. Have you even looked at the school catalog yet? Sylvia blinked and shook her head. Maybe you should, her mother suggested. That will not only tell you what courses are available, but will also give you information on enrollment dates, prerequisites, and anything you need to know. I can do that, Sylvia nodded, agreeing with her mother's suggestion. Do it now, before you forget again, her mother cautioned. Yes, ma'am. Sylvia set down the remote that she did not end up using and stood from the couch. Stood from the count. Count Couchula, at your service. That's an interesting image. She went into the kitchen where her phone had been charging and pulled it off of the charger. Rework that. She flipped it over to see if there were any new notifications. There were a few different notifications from social media, her email, and a couple of mobile games she played. But there were no messages. Frowning, she carried the phone back to the couch. Don't sit down yet, her mother snapped at her. Sylvia, whose eyes were on the phone, snapped at her head up at her mother. She was not only dressed in scrubs and had her hair pulled back, but she was slipping into her shoes with her purse already slung over her shoulder. Are you about to go? Sylvia asked. I am, her mother confirmed. Could you please get your father? He should be almost done with the yard work, but I don't want him to miss me leaving. Okay, Sylvia walked into the little room that served as their breakfast area and unlocked and opened a door that served as a pass-through to the backyard. Dad, she called. The backyard was a medium rectangular tract of land. In all of their years living there, Sylvia and her parents did not do anything with the land other than mow it and have the occasional barbecue. However, this year, because of his abundant time off, Sylvia's father had decided he was going to try his hand at growing vegetables and was currently setting up some square boxes for the attempts. What's up, Sylv? He called back to her, hammering a nail into what looked like a wall of one of the boxes. Mom's about to leave for her class. Okay, her dad answered. Oh, I need to, continuity, because hand. Oh, also with the remote, too. What's up, Sylv? He called back to her, hammering a nail into what looked like the wall of one of the boxes. Mom's about to leave for her class. Okay, her daddy answered. He hit the nail once more, examined his work, and then set the hammer down before standing himself up and turning toward the house. His jeans were grass-stained and his shirt was wet with sweat. Tell her I'm coming, he said. Sylvia nodded and left the door open as she made her way to her mother. He's on the way. He just finished hammering something. Good. Her mother smiled at Sylvia, and then again at her husband as he stepped through the door. Her smile faded as she saw how messy he had gotten while doing his project. Maybe we can do a long-distance kiss goodbye? She asked nervously. What? And avoid getting your new scrubs dirty? Come here, he joked, taking a few threatening steps toward his wife. Nope, she refused as she pulled the front door open. Love you, but not going to get these dirty for you. At least not on the first day. So what you're saying is, Sylvia's dad stopped in the middle of the living room. There's a chance? Not today, there's not. Sylvia's parents laughed at the exchange, and her father ended up blowing her mother a kiss. Drive safe. I'll have leftovers in a container for you when you get back, he promised. Her mother blew him a kiss in return. Looking forward to it. And then she was gone. Sylvia watched the exchange, all the while hoping that the earth would come up and swallow her whole. Her dad turned toward her, still grinning from the exchange with his wife, and blinked. What's wrong, Sylv? You look petrified. Can you two just not? She asked, shaking her head slowly. Just not what? Be all lovey-dovey. What's wrong with that? He asked. You know, expressing love in a way your partner reacts positively to is a very healthy practice that more people should embrace, he said, answering her unspoken complaint. But I don't need to or want to see it. Her father chuckled at her statement. Kids never want to see their parents acting romantic. That's a fact of life, he admitted. You've got that right, Sylvia agreed, before sitting back down on the couch with her phone in hand. What are you up to, kiddo? Her dad asked. I'm gonna make a note here to elaborate more. I told Mom I'm interested in going to community college for art. Oh, that's good, her father complimented her. Thanks, but Mom says that she wants me to take some other courses too, so that I can have something to take to the workforce or something. I'm about to look through the courses now to see what's available. Well, you were saying a while ago that you weren't prepared to market yourself as a painter, so getting some skills that will help you get a job can be a great step in the right direction. I don't dislike what your mother suggested. I'm gonna highlight that for rework. Sylvia sighed heavily. Of course you don't. You're always on her side. Damn Skippy, he said with a wink. Don't say that again. He laughed. I make no promises. Well, except this next one. I promise that I am going to shower in the next few minutes. Figure out what you want for dinner, Sylv, and I'll get to making it once I'm out of the shower. Shouldn't it have been Mom's choice, since she started classes today? He shook his head. She told me to leave it up to you. She's only having leftovers of whatever we're having anyway, so she won't be able to have it right out off the oven. Off the oven? Out of the oven. When's she coming home? Sylvia asked, realizing she never asked how long the class was. Since it was an accelerated course, did that mean classes will be longer than normal? How long was a normal class? Sylvia's father shrugged. She said the class itself is about 3 hours with a 10-minute break in the middle, but it's about a good 20 miles away, so it really depends on traffic, he explained. So, at least 3 hours till she's home again? Sylvia reasoned. Definitely more than that, but yes, 3 hours is a good starting point, her father said. Anyway, kiddo, I'm taking that shower now. Figure out what you want to eat. Okay, Sylvia answered. her head going back down to her phone as she started typing in information that would allow her to bring up the community college's website and start going through the catalog. There we go. The website was difficult to navigate. It talked about programs and degrees, but she just wanted to know what classes were offered. With a sigh, she realized that she would have to click on a degree path to see what the related classes would be. She looked at the offerings and decided to click on a link that mentioned certificates, and found herself with another tree of options that, once again, didn't mention specific courses. However, this time the options were more varied, and it did list things that caught her attention. Things like photography, interactive media, and mechatronics. Interested in whatever that last word was, Sylvia clicked and found... tapped the phone. And found herself on a page that had images of robots and discussion points about electronics and computers. Quickly realizing that this was not a page she wanted to review, she hit back on the browser and continued scrolling. There were several that piqued her interest, but didn't have any courses that she knew her mother would approve of. So she kept looking at the options until she found something that seemed suitable for both her needs and her mother's needs. "I think this is it," she said out loud. "What is it?" her dad asked as he stepped out of their bathroom, his hair out of their bedroom, his hair wet and combed back. "I think I found a few courses that I can take with art that will make both me and Mom happy." "Oh yeah?" her dad asked as he walked across the living room toward the kitchen. "What is it?" "Well, it's a certificate program course load," she explained. "Art isn't... excuse me. Art actually isn't one of them, but I think I'll take that, and then I'll take these." We'll rephrase that. "But what is it?" he asked again. "Web development," she said proudly. "How will that help you in the workforce?" he asked. "So, in order to get this, I have to take classes that teach me things like databases and how to use office systems like emails and document creation and things like that." "Don't most kids your age know that stuff?" he asked. She shook her head. "I don't have a computer, Dad," she said. "So unless we had to use it in class, I've never used that stuff." "Oh," he said, looking down. "That's on us. We tried to avoid tempting you with screen time." "Sorry, kiddo." Sylvia shrugged. "It's alright. I'm pretty sure that even if we had a computer, I wouldn't be too familiar with that stuff anyway. I like painting and going out way more." "Then we raised you well." He smiled and blinked. "By the way, what's going on with your friend Vanessa? I haven't heard you guys talk in a while." "Oh," Sylvia set her phone down. Her father repeated what she said. He turned away from the kitchen and stood by the couch, looking concerned. "What happened?" "We had a fight this morning?" Yeah, this is kind of weird. "So you're currently on a break? No longer friends? Hate each other?" "No." She shook her head vehemently at the last part. "We don't hate each other. Vanessa just... She thinks we need to spend some time apart." Celia pouted and flopped back against the back of the couch. "Rough, since you two just patched things up not too long ago. Want to talk about it?" "No," Sylvia said, her eyes going up to the ceiling again. "Maybe." "What was the fight about?" her dad asked, leaning against the back of the couch also. He was just standing. When did he sit? "Don't you have to cook dinner?" Sylvia accused. your mom's not going to be home for 3 hours, and you need my attention. I think dinner can be a little late tonight. Fine, Sylvia sighed. She didn't really want to tell him about what was happening between her and Vanessa, but at the same time, she was glad he was interested enough to ask. He also had some good insights last time. Maybe he'd have some this time too. So, what started the fight? He prompted. So, before I start, Sylvia felt the need to preface. I just want you to know that I'm not jealous. Her dad crooked his eyebrow but said nothing. When prom happened, Vanessa agreed to meet this boy, Thomas, there. They kissed and stuff, and that was supposed to be it. Then, on Monday, Vanessa was all like, I don't like him, I'm an ice queen, I don't want a boyfriend, and so on. But then he came up and asked to talk to her, and the next thing I knew, he was sitting with us at lunch and during the bomb threat. Wait, her dad interrupted. So this was all things that happened last week? Yeah, I'll get to this week in a minute, Sylvia promised. Okay. So, yes, Thomas had been hanging out with us the entire time, basically, Sylvia said. Even when Vanessa was in the hospital, he still came and sat at our spot during lunch, with just me there. It was very awkward. I can imagine, her dad said. Anyway, now this week Vanessa is back in school, and Thomas is still all over her. Sylvia blinked and blushed at what she just said. Yeah, we can cut that, I think. Is still hanging out and focusing most of his attention on her, which is fine. But then, I guess on Tuesday or something, Vanessa got permission from her parents to let him drive her home. That's sweet, her dad commented. Isn't it? But Sylvia trailed off, huffing. But, her dad asked, but she didn't tell me, man, started slacking off there. But she didn't tell me any of it until Wednesday afternoon, right before he took her home. So you're upset that she didn't tell you? Yes! Sylvia nodded and hit her hand against the couch cushion. She immediately winced at the pain. Ow! Is that why you threw the glass into the sink? Her dad asked. What? No, I swear, that was just an accident. Okay, so let me guess what happened. You said, and he started to mimic their voices. Vanessa, didn't you tell me you were going to be driving off with Timmy instead of hanging out with me? And then she said, I don't have to tell you anything, I love Timmy. And the fight happened? Sylvia's jaw was agape after the little, very small theatrics that her father performed. They're also kind of overblown. Not quite like that, she answered slowly. Similar, yeah, but first, his name's Thomas, not Timmy. And second, she never said she loves him. She paused and frowned. I don't know if she even trusts him like she trusts me. You mean with medical stuff? He asked. Sylvia nodded. I mean, if he's going to be driving her, and she's got her parents' permission, it's possible she told him, but... She frowned as the thought formed in her head while she was speaking it. But it's possible she told him, and I just don't know. Her dad reached over and put a hand on her shoulder. Sylv, are you upset that she's doing things with him that she used to do with you? No. Sylvia shook her head and shrugged his hand off her shoulder. I'm upset that she's just not sharing with me like she used to. I mean, before he was sitting at our table, she tried to let me know, and that was a week ago. This week, it's like she's a new person. She did just come out of a hospital, her father pointed out. Situations like that can impact the way we make our decisions. Sylvia sighed and closed her eyes. Well, she's making her decisions based on what she wants, and doesn't seem to be caring for what I want, she said. Did you hear yourself just now? just said she's not caring about me, Sylvia said, rephrasing her statement. Not quite. You said she doesn't seem to care about what you want, he said, emphasizing the word want. Yeah, and? Sylvia asked, not sure where this was going. Let me reverse that. Do you care about what Vanessa wants? Of course. Don't you think that if I asked her if she cared about what you want, she would say the same thing? Well, yeah, I think. I think if we were asked about it, we would say that we care. But actions speak louder than words, Dad. Let me ask this, he continued. What was it that you wanted that she did not seem to care about? Keeping me in the loop. Her father did his best to stifle a chuckle at that, but he did not address it. Instead, he said, Okay, and what do you think it is that she wants? To be with Thomas? Did she tell you that's what she wanted? No. When you argued, did she accuse you of anything? Sylvia paused and thought back to the argument they had earlier in the morning. She said that she doesn't always have to tell me everything? She saw her father stifle another chuckle. Okay, he continued. So to make sure I'm understanding correctly, you're upset because she didn't tell you something that you thought you should have been told, given your level of friendship. Yes. Sylvia nodded. And she said that she's upset with you because it feels like you are making her obligated to tell her everything. Not quite in those words, Sylvia said, frowning. And I don't... Do you remember what it was that she said? Her father cut her off. Sylvia glared at him for a moment. She knew what he was doing. He was trying to get her to see her friend's side. This wasn't the first time he had questions like these. She said something like, I don't always have to tell you everything, she answered defensively. Her father nodded. So, it sounds like she wants to live her life without needing to tell you everything. But on the flip side, if she doesn't tell you everything, it feels like a betrayal of the friendship to you. You've got that wrong. She doesn't have to tell me everything, Sylvia complained. I was just hurt that she didn't tell me about the change in plans. Like, reading over this, it feels like some things are being said over and over again, it feels like, but at the same time, not to the point where it feels like it's being said over and over, if that makes sense. I might catch more of this nuance on the next pass through. Excuse me. You've got that wrong. She doesn't have to tell me everything, Sylvia complained. I was just hurt that she didn't tell me about the change in plans. Her dad's expression changed, his eyes raising and his mouth smiling somewhat. Did you tell her that? I don't like the word somewhat here. I'm gonna mark this. Tell her what? That you were hurt by it. No? Why would I? Did she? I want to just double check that. He smiled and chuckled. You do realize that you and your mother have had similar arguments in the past. We have not, Sylvia denied the claim. Let's see. Her dad looked off in the distance. I seem to recall a question your mother posed to you on a certain Saturday morning at 2 a.m. a few weeks ago. Huh? Sylvia blinked. Are you talking about when she asked why I was up and I said it was none of her business? Precisely. That's different. Your mother's job is to make sure you grow up happy and healthy and getting a good night. Getting a good night of sleep is one of those tasks, he explained. She wanted to know why you were up at 2 in the morning, but you weren't telling her. To her, that felt like a violation of your trust in her as a mother. But to you... I'm my own person, so why should I tell her? Sylvia recalled the words she used in the argument the next day keenly. And you and your mother, and myself even, have had that type of conversation more than once over the years, he explained. Heck, every relationship usually has that type of argument at least once, in some form or another. Your mother and I have had it once or twice ourselves too. What do you do when that happens? Sylvia asked. We establish our expectations and boundaries. He replied. We are both our own people, but it's human to worry. When I started traveling for my last job, your mother was constantly sending me messages, he explained. She was worried that... He paused and shook his head. That's not for me to tell. Sylvia knew what he was avoiding to say. There were always rumors about traveling businessmen, and every time her dad went on a trip, she was also afraid that something salacious would come out of it. She was ultimately glad, though, that nothing ever did. Anyway, he continued, I told her that I couldn't keep getting those messages, and that depending on where I was flying to, we would set up a time to talk sometime in the evening after my meetings would surely be done. That seemed to alleviate her concerns a lot. I also made the promise that if something were to ever happen that would delay or postpone a call, I would send her a message to let her know. That only happened twice, and your mother was understandably concerned, but also knew that what the job entailed. So was thankfully very understanding. Do you understand what I'm getting at? He asked. Wow, that was a good way to try to avoid the ban. But, unfortunately... Not good enough. Should have grabbed the phrase first, though. Oh well. Where was I? Do you understand what I'm getting at? He asked. Yeah, I like the story. I don't think it needs to be reworked. It sounds like you guys compromised. Mom stopped texting you, but got you to call almost every night instead. Yes. Every relationship requires some sort of compromise. What about between you and me? She asked. Sometimes, between a parent and child, the compromise is more parent-favored, he admitted. But as the child grows and gets wiser and wiser, the child is able to get compromises to be more equal, if not more in their favor overall. Like when? Like if I want you to clean your room, but you want to go to a party, you promise to pick up half now and then the other half after the party, he said, referring to something that happened when she was in middle school. Okay, I think I get it, she said. But what about between me and Vanessa? He shrugged. You've got to sit down and, first of all, acknowledge that you hurt her feelings and that you understand what it was that you hurt. Then you apologize. And then you try to work out some sort of understanding about where your boundaries might be. Maybe you agree to never doubt her if she decides not to share something with you. That's going to be a lot of work, Sylvia admitted. That's how we grow as people, her dad said. What if she doesn't want to apologize to me, though? Sylvia asked. Well, remember, relationships are it's a two-way street. Are a two-way street, he said, using an old adage. If you're ready to apologize and walk the road, but she's not, then you'll just need to give her the signal and decide when she's ready. I like it overall, but I feel like we need to rework this a little bit more. Give it like a massage or finesse. No one can make her ready before she is actually ready. And if she never apologizes? He shrugged. Then you can take a moment out of your day, apologize to her, and then be on your way. It might hurt if this is something that she's truly going to end up in the friendship for, but dwelling on it will make it worse. Sylvia nodded and frowned. I'll try tomorrow and see what happens. Her dad shook his head. No. Unless she signals that she's ready, give it a few days. Why? Why not right away? You said she wanted to be separate for a while, right? Yeah. Then, if you go back the next day, that's not really considered a while, and not really respecting her wishes. So, since she's the one who said we should be separate for a while, she gets to make the rules? Within reason, her dad nodded. Obviously, you're not going to go all the way through graduation without trying, but a few days should be enough for both of you to get the space requested. And if she wants to reconcile sooner, then that is on her to do. What if she thinks I'm the one who should reach out? Then you will, in a few days. Sylvia thought for a moment. What about Monday? Monday sounds like a good plan. Alright, that was a long chapter. We have about 30 minutes left. Let me just take a look at this chapter. Okay, cool. It's short. Sylvia, April 26th. The next day went by fairly quickly. Very few notable things happened throughout the day in Sylvia's mind. Of course... Alright, yeah, we're just mark you. Of course, Vanessa wasn't there to greet her. Instead of stopping to talk for a minute before entering the school, Sylvia went in and just prepared herself for the day, like she had done so many times in the first semester. The classes went by mostly uneventfully. She was able to get a couple of friends in her classes to allow her to copy their notes so she could use them for studying. A couple required payment, not too much, just a few dollars, and Sylvia was happy to oblige. The worst class was economics. Not only was Vanessa sitting off to her side, but she was pointedly ignoring Sylvia's presence. Even when Chastity or Prudence or whatever we end up naming her made a snide remark about the fake injury, Vanessa seemed more interested in reading her textbook than making any sort of reaction. That hurt Sylvia the most. I think if I do the overlapping chapters, that this is going to be one of them, or called out in one of them. Even during lunch, much like yesterday, no one was at the table that she normally shared with Vanessa. Apparently, she and Thomas had decided to eat somewhere else. Again. So, at the end of the day, when Sylvia was leaving her art class and making her way through the students toward her locker, she was surprised to see someone unexpected standing by her row of lockers. "Are you lost?" she asked the young man as she walked around him and settled in front of her locker so she could open it and exchange her books for the evening ahead. I'm gonna rework that. Thomas shook his head. "No, I've been waiting for you." Sylvia blinked and turned to face him. "Why? What happened between you and Vanessa? Obviously she's avoiding you, but she won't tell me why." "We had an argument yesterday," Sylvia said, energy draining from her voice as she recalled the fight. He nodded. "I thought it might be something like that. I'm sorry." Sylvia blinked. "Why are you sorry? It's not your fault. You don't have anything to do with it. Well, nothing major to do with it." Thomas blinked in confusion. "I thought I was coming between you two." Sylvia shook her head. "Look, Vanessa's an amazing person. One of the brightest, more positive people you'll ever get to meet. I'm legit happy that you two are together. Honestly. You're not coming between us, I promise. We had a fight about something else." "Can I ask what it was about?" Sylvia hesitated. Vanessa might have had the reins on the friendship split up for now, but who had control on what the fight was about? If she said why she had a fight, would Vanessa be upset? If she didn't say anything, would that mean that Vanessa didn't care? I don't like that line. It seemed obvious to Sylvia that Vanessa wasn't telling Thomas anything. Did she want him to know why they were fighting, as silly as it was? Alright, heads up for my Twitch viewers, there is an ad coming in 4 or 5 minutes. Then, a thought occurred to her. Vanessa wasn't telling Thomas about the fight because he hadn't heard enough of her to... Oh. He hadn't earned enough of her trust yet. That must mean she still hadn't told him about her situation. If she was planning on telling him, that would be way more substantial of something to say than why they were... What? If she was planning on telling him, that would be way more substantial of something to say than why they were fighting. If she had told him about it, then a silly thing like them... If she had told him about that, then a silly thing like them arguing over trust issues, ironically enough, wouldn't be something to keep from him. A smile spread across Sylvia's face at the realization. She then shook her head, and her voice took on something much warmer and slightly more energetic than it had been previously. We had a fight about trust. I won't go into details. She paused for a moment and said, if she's open to it, I'd like to talk with her on Monday. You don't have to pass that along. I just wanted you to know. Thomas blinked at the statement and nodded. Okay, I don't know if she's wanting to talk, but yeah, I'll let her know that I spoke with you, and you didn't share anything either. And that you might want to talk? He seemed genuinely confused at the situation, other than the fact that his girlfriend and her friend were having issues. Sylvia smiled. Thanks. Thomas started to turn around, and then paused and looked back to Sylvia. Hey. Sylvia, who had started to resume her end-of-day locker ritual, looked over at him. Yeah? Why did he just come back? I just wanted to thank you. Why? Sylvia blinked. Well, Vanessa's not exactly my first girlfriend, he started. That's nothing to thank me for, she said. He had better end that statement much differently than how he began it. So far, her impression of him was neutral, but the wrong words could make that change easily. We'll mark this for review. He shook his head. No, it's not. But I didn't say what I meant to, he explained. My past girlfriends have always had friends who hated me. They didn't like that they were spending so much time with me. Sylvia looked down. She knew she also felt that way, at least a little bit. Okay, consistency here, come on. I know we're teenagers, but seriously. Sylvia looked down. She knew she also felt that way, at least a little bit, but she also understood the situation. He continued on, even as she was no longer looking at him. So it usually ended up with in a pick him or me sort of deal. You haven't been like that, and that I'm aware of, even though Vanessa can only spend time with me during school, and I think you're in the same boat. I think Vanessa would have told me you were jealous of our time together if it was. He continued to explain, so that's why I'm thanking you. You're a good friend to Vanessa, and she is really bothered by the fight. I can tell, even with how little I've been around her at this point. But you've also been accepting of me too, which I do appreciate. Thanks, Sylvia. So, I like it. I think it just needs to be cleaned up. Alright. Oh, we still have time. Make sure this isn't a long chapter, though. Perfect. Long-ish. Longer-ish. Alright, so Sylvia... April something. Alright, so... The 15th was the Monday, the 20th I think was... That's Tuesday... No, Wednesday, Friday? No. My brain doesn't like me. It's Wednesday. So that's Thursday. The 26th is Friday. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I'm just scanning to see what day April here, which is question mark Sunday. And we'll come back and fill that in a minute or 5. The weekend felt like one of the most boring weekends Sylvia had ever had to endure. Her best friend was not only limited on how often she could talk, but she was also enforced phone usage restrictions, and that didn't really matter because they're currently no contact anyway. That would still be passable though if Sylvia could even feel confident reaching out to her, since the fight she had done her best, as recommended, to keep her distance and allow her friend and herself to have some time apart from one another. That's the key. She missed bantering back and forth over text, even if it was half an hour apart. In addition to that, she couldn't distract herself with painting since she couldn't grasp anything smaller or softer than a pillow without her hand feeling like it was catching on fire. I think that's a terrible explanation. So she spent the majority of the weekend doing what she probably should have been doing anyway. Studying for her exams at the start of the following week. This week the teachers pretty much guaranteed study sessions ranging from quiet study in class to in-class games and review lectures. So there would be an opportunity to study even if she didn't get around to studying this weekend. But what else was there to do? Alright, so I feel like I like the imagery sort of, but the execution not so good. But what else was there to do? She eagerly joined her parents in the living room if either of them were out, welcoming the distraction. However, they encouraged her to prioritize her studies and didn't stay in the living room for too long. Her mother didn't work on the weekend, but she spent most of her time out of the house taking the classes 6-hour days in an effort to finish the curriculum faster. Her father, meanwhile, had spent a good portion of his time in the backyard working on his gardening project. Vanessa could have left the house if she wanted to, at least to go on a walk. No one was available to hang out, and she wasn't about to ask Vanessa. At one point, Sylvia did go on the community college website and at least applied for admission to the school. She couldn't enroll in any classes yet, since the fall semester deadline had passed, but at least it was a start. On Sunday evening, so... I think that's the 28th. And yeah, I'm just going to do the day of the week with it. Story is mostly overish now, but this just helps keep track. Her mother didn't work on the weekend, but she spent most of her time out of the house taking the classes 6-hour days in an effort to finish the curriculum faster that needs to be reworked. Her father, meanwhile, had spent a good portion of his time in the backyard working on his gardening project. Sylvia could have left the house if she had wanted to, at least to go on a walk. No one was available to hang out, and she wasn't about to ask Vanessa. At one point, Sylvia did go on to the community college website and applied just gonna eat that. Applied for admission to the school. She couldn't enroll in any classes yet since the fall semester deadline had passed, but at least it was a start. On Sunday... Oh. That's a thought. On Sunday evening, Sylvia scanned over her government notes for the last time before finally succumbing to the temptation, and she laid her head down in the middle of the textbook. I don't get it. Please let me learn by osmosis, she complained. No one was around to laugh or berate her for her actions. Instead, she sat up, one of the pages stubbornly sticking to her forehead in protest for a couple inches before peeling away and dropping back to the rest of the book. I'm bored and my brain can't handle any more, she complained. She looked at the clock. It was 5:40. Her mom's class should be ending soon, and her dad should be coming in from the garden at any moment to wash up and get started on dinner. Maybe I'll just allow myself some TV, she muttered as she pushed herself up off the floor and made her way to the living room. As she made her way over, the phone in her pocket started vibrating. Surprised, Sylvia pulled it out. No one actually called her. What was happening that required a call? Was her mom okay? The name on the caller ID surprised her even more than the phone ringing. She hurriedly unlocked the phone and accepted the call. Vanessa? She asked. Part of her was afraid that someone somehow managed to spoof her friend's number and was prank calling her. Sylvia? It was Vanessa's voice on the other end. This wasn't a prank. The blonde teenager almost felt her legs buckle from under her. This was one of the last things she was expecting. Stumbling over to the couch, she tried to find the words to reply. Sylvia, are you there? Vanessa's voice came again. Yeah, I'm here. It's me. She felt so dumb confirming that it was her. Vanessa's the one who called her. Of course she knew that it was her. Alright, let's mark this for a revamp. There's a silence. Sorry, my nose is itchy. There was silence from the other side, and so now it was Sylvia's turn to ask. Are you there, Vanessa? Yeah, sorry. Me too. Huh? Sylvia blushed. She was so ready to apologize. She didn't realize that Vanessa's sorry was for something completely different. I mean, I'm sorry I haven't talked to you lately. I was trying to give us that separation, you know? Yeah, Tom told me, Vanessa confirmed. I have to say, I didn't really expect that, but I thank you either way. You didn't expect it? It's dumb, Vanessa said. For some reason, I thought you were wanting to slip a note in my locker or something all day Friday, wanting to talk. Honestly, I kind of did, Sylvia admitted. But I wanted to compromise and let you have at least a couple days without me. She chuckled. I don't know if Thomas told you this, but I was planning on reaching out tomorrow. Vanessa also chuckled in return. He did. Also chuckled in return. That feels like it's a lot. He did. I've got to admit, I was kind of pissed at him for talking to you when I told him I didn't want him to... Wow. I've got to admit, I was kind of pissed at him for talking to you when I told him I didn't want to talk to him about why I was avoiding him. But I'm over that. And then I kept thinking about talking to you on Monday. And then I decided I didn't want to wait. Why? Google, you confuse me sometimes. And then I decided I didn't want to wait anymore, so here I am. You're calling me, though, Sylvia pointed out. Why? She can almost picture Vanessa shrugging on the other end. Why not? Anyway, I had no idea what would happen if I sent a text. If you were just going to ignore it, or if I might have a mood swing, or something and get mad at you before you reply. I don't know. Mood swing. You know. Oh. Yeah, we're probably just gonna... We don't need to have that in there. So anyway, I figure I'd call and take my chances. It worked out. Yeah, it did. What about your parents and your bed rest? You sound awfully tired, Sylvia pointed out. I am pretty sleepy, Vanessa admitted. But my parents stepped outside to stargaze or something, so I figured I'd take the opportunity to call. Stargaze at what, 5:40? Consistency. Well, thanks for calling, Sylvia said, feeling genuinely grateful. Yeah, no problem. How's your hand? Still hurts. Vanessa said nothing for a few moments and then said, I know you've been asking around for people's notes for studying. If you want, I can copy my notes to send to you, she offered slowly. Sylvia wasn't sure why she was being so slow to offer it. Yeah, that'd be great, Sylvia said, a grin spreading across her face despite her initial concern about the offer. Thank you. Of course, Vanessa replied. Sylvia can almost hear the grin on her friend's face as well. That's what friends are for. I heard you had offered to pay someone for their notes. Now you don't need to. That is, if you hadn't already paid them. I haven't given anyone any money yet, no, Sylvia confirmed. If you want, I don't need any payment, Vanessa was quick to deny that offer. Are you sure? Sylvia asked. It's not a lot, but it's still money. Sylvia, what do I need with money? That question seemed to come out of nowhere, and both girls went silent for an extended period of time as they both contemplated what the question meant. Vanessa's hushed voice came back over the phone to end the silence. My parents are coming back inside now. I'll see you tomorrow? See you tomorrow, Sylvia replied as the call ended in her ear. She exhaled, and looked at the phone in her hand. A picture of her friend and the amount of time they had spent talking left on the display as a record of the conversation. Vanessa Fletcher... Fleming... I don't remember what the other name was. 4:17. 4 minutes and 17 seconds. It wasn't a long call by that measure, but it still felt like their short conversation lasted for an hour. Maybe it was because of those moments of silence. Sylvia closed her eyes and reflected on that last moment of silence. Vanessa had been quick to point out that money was nothing for her. It wasn't that she or her family were rich, although her dad was a doctor. It was that Vanessa seemed certain that she had no use for it. The young blonde woman set the phone down on the bed between her legs and just stared at the screen as she recalled the details about Vanessa that had come up in their friendship that should have clued her into the situation before it came out a few months ago. Vanessa didn't drive. It wasn't because she didn't want to nor need to. It was because when most other kids their age were getting their permits and licenses, Vanessa was likely undergoing treatment and had no ability, and quite possibly no energy, to get behind any sort of vehicular wheel. Vanessa knew a lot of details about medical things. That wasn't too terribly uncommon, especially among students who were interested in the medical field. One of Sylvia's other friends wants to be a nurse, and would often spout how bad the food in the cafeteria was. Of course, Vanessa's father was also a doctor, and she did cite him as being a source of her knowledge. Still, Sylvia surmised, a good portion of Vanessa's medical knowledge also came from her time within the hospital system as well. It would make sense that spending so much time in the hospital would make her aware of various ailments that could land a person in the hospital, or at least treatments that could be performed while there. Vanessa didn't do extracurricular activities. Right now, it was obvious she wouldn't be able to take them simply because she was on the doctor-ordered regimen of rest. But before that, she just went home. Sylvia never questioned it because she also didn't do extracurricular activities. But now that she was thinking about the situation more, Vanessa was a bubbly, outgoing person. It didn't make sense for her not to try to be involved in some sort of activity. Sure, Sylvia could chalk it up to nerves and being the new girl, but that didn't seem like Vanessa. No, Sylvia once again reasoned. The more likely explanation was that Vanessa was simply not feeling up to the task of an after-school activity on a regular basis, even if she seemed like she had the energy. A lot like the extracurricular activities, Vanessa, like Sylvia, also didn't have a job. For Sylvia's part, it wasn't due to lack of trying, but she never heard Vanessa talk about her own attempts at job hunting. Sylvia wasn't too worried about the job hunt, at least not until summer came around, and so she probably assumed that Vanessa was the same way. After today's discussion, though, that made Sylvia realize one more important aspect of regarding Vanessa's nature and personality. Vanessa never seemed to plan for the future. She was a good student, so it was assumed by everyone, including Sylvia, that she was planning on going to college with her good grades and go somewhere with them. Sylvia recalled the reaction Vanessa had when she gifted her the park painting. Vanessa seemed sad, and said something that piqued Sylvia's attention. Sylvia didn't recall exactly what was said, but now that she was thinking back, it seemed to align with the fact that, for Vanessa, no tomorrow was ever promised. As the screen on the phone between Sylvia's legs faded to black, Sylvia tried to piece together Vanessa's timeline. Vanessa's cancer had recurrence this spring. No, we're going to push that back to... late. Here, you know what? I'm just going to highlight that. She was noted as being in remission last year during summer at some point. Before that, Sylvia wasn't sure how long her friend had been battling the cancer. She assumed it was probably for close to 2 years, considering how Vanessa's mother and Vanessa had spoken about how rough her initial fight... I'm going to actually highlight this for research. Considering how Vanessa's mother and Vanessa had spoken about how rough her initial fight with the disease had been, and how badly Vanessa wanted this year of high school to be as normal as possible. Sylvia tilted her head in thought, and then she grabbed a piece of paper and a pencil so she could quickly, though messily, write down a thought she had before it flittered off into the ether, where most of her lost ideas ended up. Alright. This does come up a little bit later, but it does eventually get lost in the ether. Alright, y'all. So that is it for today's edits. Let me go ahead and prep this next chapter, and then we'll wrap it up next Monday morning, which is the 29th. Sylvia, April 29th, Monday. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I will be back tomorrow. The plan is to stream until 6 tomorrow, but I probably won't start until like 2 or 3 again. But yeah, it was great seeing all y'all today, and I will see y'all again tomorrow. Thanks for joining. Bye.